teachers and lecturers and academics across the country. So we talked a little bit about what the structure of the program would be and what we aim to do with this and how it's been designed in terms of the different modules. So today what we are covering is enhancing instructional design through educational technology. So when we talk about teaching online, the first thing that so this course has kept been designed keeping into mind the requirements, the actual practical requirements that all of us have faced, and how we can facilitate teachers to be able to teach effectively in a virtual classroom. So the very first thing that we talk about, actually, sorry, I'm going to go back to my introduction a little bit for those of you who are not here in the morning. So my name is Sumbul Manzoor, and I am an academic and a business management professional. I'm also a chartered manager from the UK, and I've been working in higher education for more than a few years now. It's been nearly 10 years. I'm currently involved in managing a team in Pakistan. We've set up a center called the International Center of Excellence, and we are looking to provide skills-based and vocational and professional trainings to professionals across different sorry, bear with me. I've got somebody who's saying Dr. S, no voice still. Is everybody able to hear me? Could I just confirm if everybody can hear me? You can just, okay, thank you. So those of you who are not able to hear me, could you just check on your own end whether your audio settings are correct? Okay, so going back to a little bit about me. So I'm basically an academic through and through. I believe in improving the quality of teaching and learning. And I work as the head of academics or the head of studies for two different organizations in the UK. One is iQualify UK, which is an online education provider, and the other is the Magna Carta College UK. So iQualify UK provides vocational trainings, and Magna Carta College provides academic degree qualifications. I'm also working as a research supervisor with the Hakim Sharni University, which means I supervise dissertation research for the postgraduate students. I've also managed to run the graduate business and management programs at University of Hertfordshire for that as well. I'm also an alumni of the Buckinghamshire University. So basically, I've been engaged as a research supervisor by my own university where I studied. So I have been very happy to be part of this initiative that NAHI has developed. And as I said, the core aim is to make sure that we upskill as many teachers and instructors, and hoping that you will cascade the training in your own institutions as well and kind of share best practice amongst your own peers and groups. And hopefully we'll have a great time moving forward with this course over the next 4 weeks. Okay. Right. As I said in the introduction, my colleague will be co-teaching this module with me. That's Mr. Ijaz Chaudhry, and he will, as I said, he's based in the UK. So he will be joining us in a few minutes, hopefully. So keeping in mind the time difference, it's 5 a.m. So I will hand it over to him once he's here about his introduction and a little bit details about his background as an academic and as an IT person, right? So, Ijaz, if you're able to take over your introduction bit.
Sumbal, I think we can move on. I think Ijaz Saab has some difficulties connecting right now. So while we figure that
Um,
out, we may move on.
okay, I actually can see him in the meeting, so I'm not sure. He's there, so he's in the chat as well. So
Ijaz Saab, can you unmute your mic?
okay, can I unmute him?
Are you still muted, Ijaz Saab? You can.
Hello, hi. Assalamu alaikum. This is Ijaz Chaudhary. I can
Yeah, we can.
start now.
Yeah,
So
we
if
can hear
somebody
you
can
now.
hear me, I
Excellent.
can start now. Okay. So can you hear me?
I can, yes, Zasvik. If you
Okay,
can just
excellent.
give your introduction, that'll be great.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Ijaz. Guys, the thing is this, that I can hear everybody perfectly well. It's either internet connection at your end or maybe something wrong with your audio facility at your end. Because I think most of us actually can hear pretty loud and clear. So I mean, when Sumbal was speaking, I could hear her loud and clear. So without any further ado, my name is Ijaz Chaudhary, and I'm in online education for the last 15 years. And at present, I run a private college which actually partners with UK-based universities to offer higher education. College is called Magna Carta College. So that's briefly my background. Other than that, I have a degree in business management and computer science, and I'm looking forward to this course. And I'll be looking at use of technology in learning environment, which is the later part of this lecture. So over to you, Sumbul. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay. Right. So as you see, there are so many things that we need to kind of incorporate or adapt and kind of manage in a virtual classroom, just like this one. So we will. So this course is actually going to be learning by showing you how to do things. So we had issues with audio or with audio mics or things. So I'm going to now move forward to what we are going to cover in this module. Okay. So within a virtual environment, it's not 100% easy to control everything. But as instructors, as teachers, what we can control is how do we impart the learning? How do we adapt the teaching style and the teaching methodologies to make sure that our learners utilize the best, utilize that information in the best way, and it's delivered without any gaps between the instructor and the learner, because there is a physical gap. But how much of the communication gap can we eliminate, and how effective and how smooth can we make the transfer of information between the teacher and the student? So in that respect, what we're going to cover today are 3 learning objectives for this module. The first one is about understanding and becoming familiar with the cognitive load theory, which is used to enhance instructional design in online teaching. Some of you may be familiar with cognitive load theory. It's more of a psychological aspect to teaching. and how learning takes place. So I will give you an introduction about the theory itself and how do we apply this and the modalities of that theory in terms of the virtual classroom. Then we'll talk about the use of technology in a virtual classroom, how educational technology, different tools and different platforms have been developed and how it can be utilized effectively in a virtual teaching environment. And the third is also the learning outcome 2 and 3 are actually collectively presented in this lecture because they're an extension of each other. So how do we use technology in facilitating instructional design? So what is the best way to use the features of different tools that we use, and how does it affect the learning of a student? Okay, so the agenda for your module would be that we'll have the live webinar, which we've started already. We're about 12 minutes in. From Monday to Friday, you have the time for module 4 to do the reading. There are 3 articles that are available on your Moodle. One of them is the required reading, which means it's mandatory for you to go through that. The other 2 are recommended readings, and they are also very helpful and very relevant to what we'll discuss today. There is a discussion forum that has been set up, and the discussion forum relates to the first required reading article. So the first article, it also refers to the research that has been done revolving around the cognitive load theory, but how it is applied in a classroom. So the discussion forum is also available moving forward after this lecture. You can have a look on Moodle. I hope everybody has access to their Moodle. And then you have a module quiz, which will be available to you on Friday. At the end of the week, once you've done the discussion forum, you've had a chance to do the reading. Even the slides will be made available to you on Moodle after the live session ends. And you can go back to have a look at the recording as well. I believe Osama will make that available for you at the end of the lecture. And you then have the module evaluation that will be conducted at the end of the unit. So you have been able to see the resources on Moodle, I'm sure, previously as well, and you would be, most of you would be familiar. Okay. So I will start off with the basic introduction to the cognitive load theory. Okay. So when we talk about the cognitive load theory, I would want to first refer to how it was developed and what exactly does it entail. So it was developed by an Australian academic psychologist. Actually, he was an educationist and a psychologist. So he talks about the cognitive load that we can carry as a learner. So cognitive itself means anything that relates to or is connected to the art of process of knowing something, perceiving something, remembering it, and then the cognitive development, the cognitive functioning as well. Or it can also be about the mental processes of how do we perceive things, how do we retain them within our memory, how do we judge things, how do we reason, and in contrast with the emotional and volitional processes. So an emotional process would be based on how you're feeling, and a volitional process would be something that you're doing out of your own choice or voluntarily doing. Okay. So CLT basically, as we'll refer it to moving forward, so because rather than going over cognitive load theory all the time, CLT. So now this is also another aspect of learning. So if I've talked about cognitive load theory once, and the next time I refer to it as CLT, you will be more likely to remember what we talked about. So again, as I said, a lot of things that we'll cover today will actually be applied in practice. We will show you how it actually makes a difference and how it's effective. So CLT focuses on the load on working memory during instruction. Okay? Because there are 2 types of memory that we have. as a human brain develops, we have the short-term memory and we have the long-term memory. I'm sure that's a very basic concept. We understand that there's things that you immediately absorb, and those are stored in a different way. And then there's long-term memories, which is which has more capacity, which you can retrieve in different ways. So CLT holds that when you undertake learning activities, especially when those that are complex, the amount of information and interaction that must be processed may underload or overload the amount of working memory one has. So the working memory is basically your short-term memory. And if you're being provided with a lot of content or a lot of intensive resources or a lot of stimuli, it might overload you, or if they're not enough, it might underload you and you might not even still retain. So both things are actually an ineffective way of providing information. So as I said, CLT was first developed by Professor John Sler. So he was an academic who studied in Australia, I think in South Wales is where he was. And his idea was to basically understand how the learning capacity of a student can be identified. So his first the start of this theory was when he started looking at people who are solving any problems. Okay. So he was running experiments and he was researching how people solve problems, and they were not able to identify. They could find solutions. I mean, we do that all the time. We have a problem and we figure out a solution, but you cannot identify what process you took. How did you come to that solution? So a lot of time we can solve a problem successfully, but have absolutely no idea how we're able to do that. So learning from experience is one way of learning. Learning by doing is another way of learning. So he started looking at how that works. And because of the different ways that we absorb information and store it, so we need to identify first how the working memory or the short-term memory and how the long-term memory are interrelated. So the quality of instructional design will be raised if greater consideration is given to the role and limitations of working memory. So this is what his basic concept was at the end of his study when he developed the cognitive load theory. This is what he identified is the core reason, that if we do not take into account how the the short-term working memory is affected and how it can actually limit the learning or the retention of a student, it will be the teaching will become ineffective. Sorry, he talks about schemas as well. So again, I'm going to explain a little bit about what a schema is. So a schema is basically a cognitive framework. Again, some of you who might have a background in psychology may be familiar with these concepts and these terminologies. Some of you might find them very new. So I'm going to go with the assumption that we'll just giving you basic information. So I'm going to try and give you simplistic definitions about it. So when we refer to a schema in psychology, it basically, the simplest way that I understand it is it's like a pattern, which can refer to either thought patterns or behavior patterns as well, okay? Which helps us categorize information, and we develop relationships between the information that we have. Okay? So it's like a structure that you prepare in your mind based on the different information, based on the different bits and pieces and perceptions. Again, there's lots of factors that can affect that. And all of us make connections in a very individualistic, different way. So a schema is developed when you have your perceptions, you have your beliefs, you have your behaviors, and you've internalized a few things. And that's how we understand things. And within every learner, we as teachers have seen that. I'm sure we've experienced that different students, different learners, different minds have different patterns, how they see things, how they understand things. For me, a mathematical concept might be something out of this world which I cannot understand. And for you, it might be something that makes absolute sense. So we've seen that in younger students as well, and we've seen that in older students as well, how they make connections in a very different way. So the CLT relies on a lot on these schemas, and as instructors, we need to understand how these are implemented in a learner. Okay, so according to John Sweller, there are three kinds of cognitive load that he talks about. So this is an important slide because these are terms. So on the top left, we have the intrinsic. I'm going to start from there, going clockwise. So the intrinsic load is the one that we say is basically the effort that I'm making with the topic. It's imposed by the material that has to be learned. So if I'm talking about any different topic with students, that's the intrinsic load, which basically talks about what material they are being supplied with, what do they need to look at, what do they need to read, what do they need to listen to. And the next one is the extraneous load. That is applied by the manner in which the information is presented. So the way I can, again, present the same lecture in a very different way. I could have just given this as a bullet point, or I could have just maybe sent you out notes to read, or I could maybe just have a narration and no video or no visuals related to it, or I could just give a very long write-up about cognitive load theory. So how the information is presented to you is the extraneous load. And this basically takes probably the most heavy load in terms of cognition, because how learners absorb this is the most important thing. And then after that, once I've absorbed what is being sent my way as the stimulus in terms of whether it's audio, whether it's video, whether it's a conversation, I will be adding and constructing my own based on my own perception, based on my own behaviors, based on my individualistic approach to that content. And then that load becomes a germane load, which is devoted to processing information, which means that this is where I'm going to absorb and keep, retain, and possibly use in future. So that's the most important one is in terms of attention. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit in detail about all three of them. So when we talk about the intrinsic cognitive load, as I said, it will be associated with a specific topic. It will be it is a characteristic of the materials themselves. So if you're looking at this slide today, the one that you're looking at right now, this is what is going to be in terms of the topic itself. The word intrinsic is your intrinsic cognitive load, in effect. Okay, this is what the topic is about. How am I presenting it? I'm just giving you a couple of bullet points, very basic information about what it actually means, what kind of features it has, and how it affects our memory. So in terms of intrinsic load, inherent difficulty cannot be changed by the instructor. So if as a learner, I'm having a difficult time trying to absorb this concept or understanding what you're saying or understanding the topic itself, that cannot be changed by the instructor. It has to come from the learners. But the same thing applies with schemas as well. So some large schemas can be chunked into smaller ones. So if I'm talking about one topic, I can modify it. I can change it into bite-sized things and make sure that it is easily absorbed. So example of an intrinsic load, right? So you can see on the left side, I have a very basic example of a mathematical equation. And it's a simple summation, 4 add 3, or give the definition of a bird, or find an element in the periodic table, or memorize even a poem. So these are instructions or directives or tasks that are absolutely simple to follow. Okay. On the other side, so these carry a low intrinsic load for a learner. On the other side, on the right side, you can see the high. Okay. You have an equation. You have detailed instructions, create a non-linear PowerPoint slideshow. Now, it has a variety of instructions within one sentence. I have to look at all of the other things. It has to be non-linear. It has to be a PowerPoint, and it has to be a slideshow as well. So there are multiple instructions all combined into one sentence. Now, this takes me time to absorb all of these, and if I'm not paying attention, I might skip out some of the instructions. And the next one is analyzing one of Shakespeare's sonnets. So now again, I have to figure out one of them, which one. It has to be a sonnet. And I have to give analysis. And again, it's an open-ended instruction, so I don't have a lot of parameters here. So I have to extend my own learning and understand in my own way what analyze means to me. Okay. The other thing that I want you to focus on this slide again, as I said, a lot of times I will be talking about what you see and how it actually relates to the theory that we're talking about. You see the two icons. You've got a low icon and a high icon. So immediately, what you'll remember in this slide, maybe a few hours down the lane or a few days down the lane, that, oh, there were two categories. Not because of what you read or not because of even what I explained, but probably more so relying on the icons that you saw, because you've got a clear arrow coming down and you've got a clear arrow going up. So that is again part of instructional design, where I'm minimizing your instructional load by making sure that it is the most prominent thing on this slide is the icons that you can see, the low and high, in terms of the text and in terms of the way that they're presented. So can a designer, sorry, or a teacher alter intrinsic load? Are we able to, do we have the capacity, or can we modify this intrinsic load? So not really, but we do have a lot of space to work around that. So I'm going to relate some more to the PowerPoint example that we talked about. Okay, so I've asked somebody to develop a PowerPoint, and I want to teach someone how to create a PowerPoint slideshow or design a web page. And so there's really not much you can do to reduce the intrinsic load, because again, it's a complicated task. It's something that they need to do. They need to understand the technicalities of how a PowerPoint works. They need to understand how it's possible to develop the different slides. But what I can do to make it easier is that instead of providing complex information altogether, I can create a step-by-step, very linear, very straightforward process where the learners can start with one skill or one concept at a time and then take them through that. So as I said in the beginning, in a physical classroom, you have so much more to rely on because you're physically in the same space. In an online classroom, you have to rely on the fact that whatever information you're providing in terms of your resource has to be effective enough. And again, the words underload or overload, they should not be on the either side of the continuum. So you can present only the bare-bone details and leave the advanced features for a later time. That's a good way, so that as a learner, I'll be able to understand the first basic concepts. I might be able to apply that. And in the next stage, you can come and then talk about the more detailed, complex features. Sometimes it's not possible. I understand that in terms of time constraint, we might not be able to do that in a lecture all the time. But this is where, as an instructor, we need to make sure that we can discriminate between what does the learner need to know and what would be nice for him to know. So the basic concepts that he can start to apply and learn and internalize should be given priority. And you should present the easier tasks before you move on to the complicated ones. So this is a very key point. As a teacher, I've done that. Maybe I'm rushed for time. I need to finish the lecture. I need to make sure that I'm running out of time. So I might just rush through a lot of complex concepts as well. So that again will be overloading the mind, and it will not make a difference. And that might even double my workload, because I might have 70 questions at the end of the lecture to answer. Okay, so we need to be able to balance this, that we do not underload or overload the learner. Okay. We then come to the extraneous cognitive load. When we talked about the 3 kinds, we said, okay, this is the one where you talk about the actual information that is being provided. Okay. You're again seeing a slide which is similar to the last one. I could have modified this. I could have maybe made it into a different color, different pattern. How am I presenting it is going to be a key factor in how you're going to remember it, how you're going to absorb it, how you're going to see it. So this is the most important feature in terms of an instructor's development of the material. But in terms of the learner outcomes, it does not directly relate to it. So the manner in which you present the content develops your extraneous load. If the instructional design is not very effective, then this load becomes very heavy. And again, it does not actually feed into the learning. It just takes away from the short-term working memory. It overloads the short-term working memory, but it does not benefit the learner in understanding the concepts. So this is where most of the instructor's control comes in. This is where we are responsible, that we can make sure we can minimize this load. So for example, when we talk about extraneous loads, extra sounds. So if there was a lot of background sounds that I had added onto the slide, it would make it distracting. If I had given long paragraphs in terms of explaining what extraneous cognitive load is, it would again be very text heavy, and you would probably not even read all of it. And if I provide multiple competing sources of information on the same slide or on one same topic, it would again distract the learner away. Unnecessary format or information, unnecessary animation as well. So technology, educational tools, and a lot of time animation is a very good support. But too much use of an animation is also not going to be helpful for the learner to absorb it. It becomes part of the extraneous load. It takes away from the actual intrinsic load. That should be the focus, because that's about the topic. And then we'll come to the germane in a bit. So what can we do in terms of the extraneous load? Once again, come back to what is absolutely necessary. What is the priority information in your content? If let's say you're delivering a concept about economics, okay? So if I'm talking about, let's say, the production possibility curve, if some of you might be familiar with economics, what does the learner need to know? Do I need to give him the concept and make him understand what the curve is about, what it relates to, okay? The relationship between the production and the demand, and how it moves forward and how it is affected? Or do I need to give him a comparison of 10 different production possibility curves across different features? So that can be done at a later stage, once the basics are understood. So you can move the priority or the need to know information from visual channel, which is reading, to the auditory channel as well. So if you can pair the trick is to find the right balance between the audio and the video. So at the moment, again, I will refer to what I'm doing right now. I've got 3 bullet points for you. They tell you exactly what can we do. So you know exactly what the information is telling you. And we're talking about, running from the previous slide, we're talking about the extraneous load, you have understood what can we do, tells you the solutions. There's 3 bullet points that you can see, so that's your visual. Everything else is being delivered as an auditory information. All the things that I'm giving you, the examples, the information, the relevance, that's not visible on the slide as a text. And as an audio channel, it is more effective to add to the text. It is so at most of the times that's what we do. We kind of forget that not all of the information needs to be provided as a visual. So key information as the visual, and supportive information, explanatory information as an auditory channel is most effective. And again, we need to try to put it into segments. But if that is not possible, depending on any constraints, especially time constraints, then maybe provide a short pre-training module describing the various components of the topic. So again, we've done that today as well. Dr. Shazia, Osama, Dr. Shaheen, they took out the introduction bit as a separate component. So you understood about what you're going to do, how you're going to learn. We took you through the basics, the basic structure of the course, and you were prepared for what will happen at 10 a.m. an hour before. You were taken through this. So once again, as I said, a lot of this lecture is developed on things that we want you to internalize and reflect by practicing them yourselves as a learner. So at the moment, you're all learners, and an hour later, you're going to go back to your instructor role. So where we want you to apply all of these skills. Okay, so what else? This is an additional thing. So with extraneous load, if removing information is not possible, then we can provide some cues, some supporting information to the learner on what they should focus on, and align graphics and text within the graphic or right next to it. So this is very important. Again, it's a very basic concept, but a lot of time when we see online content, this is overlooked. Okay, so on the right side, you can see an image which shows you a right angle triangle and with some numbers and letters. And on the left side, you have 2 clear sentences of text, and they tell you what you're supposed to be doing. The task is to find the area of a triangle, multiply the base, b times the height, and then divide by 2. Okay, so you can clearly see the letter B times the height, and then the 2. You can also see B times H written in the background, divided by 2. So you can see the visual concept of everything that has been referred to in the text. And then you have an example given to you in terms of numbers, in terms of tangible solutions. Okay. Now, the same thing I could provide you like this. So you've got the text on the side, and then you've got the image, which is not aligned, which you have to go look for separately. And this makes all the difference to the way that the human mind processes information. So again, we are building up on the CLT throughout. So all of these aspects that I'm discussing with you today are based on the CLT research. Professor Sweller identified that how we present information, and he ran multiple experiments, and separate pieces of information have to be connected by the human brain and then retained in the short-term memory and then shifted onto the long-term memory. So if you have too much information, it doesn't yield anything in the long term. So he discovered that it is so much better retained when you offer it in separate pieces, but aligned ones. So if I had given you an image on one slide and the text on the next slide, again, it would not be, you would find it difficult to retain it. But the effectiveness of the individual pieces are that they fit in together. Okay, okay, so we now, another idea of extraneous load would be if I'm giving you, sorry, I'm going to go back because I'm not starting Germain yet. I'm giving you information about how to get from where you are in terms of walking or driving. If I give you 3 sets of instructions in one sentence, okay, go straight ahead, then turn right at the third traffic lights, and then you walk for another 500 meters, and then you take a left and then cross the street, and then you will see a little bridge, and then you cross that bridge, and then you'll arrive at the train station. How many of you were able to understand those directions, or would you be able to repeat them to me? I guess not very many of you. But if you were to now, right, so definitely. So it was a very complex information, a set of information that was given to you within a very short span of time. You have no visual with it. It was just audio. Had I shown you a map, it might have been a lot more easier to understand that. Had I drawn something live in front of you, would have helped you. But the other thing that you can do in this situation is you can ask me questions again. You can try and repeat what I've said, and then we can have a further aligned discussion. So you can say, okay, did you say left or did you say right? Or do I cross the street and turn left, or do I cross the street and turn right? So again, alignment of the information is very important, and this can be done two ways as well, not just on the instructor's end. Okay, we now come to the germane cognitive load. So this is entirely under the control of the instructional designer, the instructor or the assessor or the teacher. Okay? This needs to be given priority. This needs to be focused or promoted, and while the extraneous should be limited. So your extraneous load, again, does not add to the learning. It should be limited. The germane load is the one that contributes primarily to your learning. And this is the load that is dedicated to the processing and construction of schemas. So again, today, if you've internalized that, okay, complex information should be given aligned with audio and video channels at the same time, simultaneously. This is a process, this is a link, this is a connection that you would have made today, if not before this. And you will now apply this to your own learning. So this is basically the example of how a schema is built within our own minds. Okay? So now what can we do to promote the germane load? So we want to promote it. We want to limit the extraneous one, enhance the germane one. So we segregate or we differentiate information based on what is essential, what is supportive, and what is additional. So these are the three categories. Today, for me, it is essential that you understand CLT, the different aspects of the different cognitive loads. It is supportive that you also identify how it was developed, what it actually, what was the history. It's supportive. Additional is maybe the background to how it links to psychology. It might help you apply the theory more effectively. But even if you don't know the psychological background to the theory, that's an additional information. It may the essential and the supportive and the additional, again, it relies on us as an instructor, as a tutor, as a teacher to identify these three categories. Using the supportive information to teach the essential. So again, I talked about the schemas, I talked about cognitive, the definitions of what a cognitive pattern does, how we develop patterns, how we develop thought processes, how we connect them, how we internalize them. That information helps you. If that was not made available to you, you would not be able to apply that to the CLT. You would not be able to understand the germane or the extraneous or the intrinsic load. But leave out the additional information as a separate resource to be retrieved when the learner seeks it. So as an instructor, we can create this differentiation. The implications for e-learning and design. A very important factor is this. It's very simply stated. So just because you can do something, it's not mandatory that you should. Okay. So in this slide, you can see there's an image, there's an icon for audio, there's another
actually
photograph.
funny and actually very descriptive.
Yes. So again, you have no idea what's happening. I've thrown in a photograph, I've thrown in a clip art, I've thrown in an audio as well. I'm not going to play the audio, but imagine all of these three things are going on at the same time. Does not add to your learning. Okay.
Yes,
So
no
some
doubt.
more thank you. Some more implications would be that we sorry, Same slide, my bad. Multimedia implications of what we can utilize. So it is better to present an explanation in words and picture than solely in words. So we've talked about a lot of things that I've put in the slides, I think I've referred to. If I just give you instruction in terms of words only, multiply two binomials, multiply the first terms in each binomial, then the last two, finally multiply the inside and outside terms and add them together. I've read this out to you, even though you might not have a mathematics background, but it has been supportive if I'm reading it out to you. But if I just leave the slide for you, you will be absolutely lost. Okay. But what I've done now is I've paired that with an image. So on the right side, you can now see, even if for a second you forgot what a binomial is, you'll have a look at the image and say, oh, okay, you've got the binomials, it's the letters and the numbers. And then what are you doing? First terms in each binomials, you've got the links, you've got the lines there. It's a very clear image and it supports the text. And it enhances your internalization of what we're trying to do. Okay. Again, they need to be presented simultaneously rather than separately. Okay, so this would be not simultaneously. A heart is one line of symmetry, and you can see it to the right. And then you've got an image. As opposed to, if it's right there, you internalize the image as well as the context to it. So again, based on all of the findings of CLT, we see that simultaneous information makes a quicker impact on your short-term memory. And then the short-term memory actually makes it easier for you to retain it in the long-term memory as well, when it's simultaneous information. Because if it's not simultaneous, if it's separately provided to you, you absorb it in two channels. And that loses out on the retention. So if you present words as an auditory narration rather than as a visual on the on-text screen, it makes it also more effective. So I've got the on-screen text, I've got an image for you. I would like you to focus on the use of light in the water, water lilies painting by Monet. Or I could simply play this as an audio. Okay, so rather than reading text, you're listening to the audio. That's taking one part of your the sensory internalization, and then you're looking at the image as well, and then you're connecting the two. And again, this makes it much more effective. So a lot of times we rely on text. And again, it comes down to the instructor's choice, the instructor's discretion, and their comfort zone as well. Sometimes you feel just writing out the text is easier, safer. But a lot of times we've seen that eliminating the text and replacing it with the audio is much more effective. And it also gives a break in between. So you basically pair the two different styles together. So text and image, and then audio and image. So coherence is also very important.
Sumbul, can I interject just for a sec?
Sure.
I think the audio, did you play the audio on your end because it plays, but I think it's unshare your slide. Osama's put it, unshare the screen, share back again, and there is like this little icon that you need to check, which says share audio. So I think that was not shared, and that's why people are
sorry about that.
eager. Yeah, people are eager to hear the audio on your slide because that's wonderful. I actually heard it yesterday. So yeah, okay.
Okay, bear with me. I'm going to start sharing again.
Yeah.
One sec. Thank you, Dr. Shazia, for spotting that. Sorry, I've
Sumbul, I think you need to unshare your screen and then before sharing it again, you need to click on share system audio. Once you do that, the audio of the video that you're playing will also start being audible.
I'm going to share the file as it is, so it should then play, because usually that's what I do. If I share it as the file from my own system, it right, I'm just going to catch up with where we were. See the screen? Is everybody okay to?
Yeah, we can see the screen, but are you also playing something right now, or are you just changing the slides?
No, I'm just actually catching back up to where I was, because it's been not
Okay.
letting me go.
Yeah, did you play the file? Because we were not able to hear it.
No, not yet. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to play it right now.
अलीना बेटा ये कैमरा ब्लर हो गया पता सही होगा इसको घुमा इधर मुंह तरफ पे मत
आज किसी की मीटिंग नहीं है क्या? किसी मीटिंग में?
Sorry, could I ask everybody to mute themselves, because we've got background noise. So I don't know if you're able to hear the audio. Osama, can you check if you're able to hear the audio now? Right, so it's basically adding to the Okay, great. Thank you everyone who's responded. So again, most of you have been able to hear it. So again, as a text instruction or as an audio instruction paired with an image are more effective. The other thing is, then we talk about coherence, extraneous words. So the word itself has the extraneous load reference to it. So germane cognitive load is your effective cognitive load, which basically adds on to the retention, the absorption of the information. It is dedicated to the processing, construction, and automation of schema. So this is where you need to focus on whether when you're developing content, whether it adds to the germane cognitive load or does it take away from it. Again, another example is too many words in pictures. So now I have an image that you look at, but there's quite a lot of description there. Here we have a picture of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Did you notice his left eye wanders to the top of his head? Do you know why? Historians tell us he was kicked in that eye by a horse, and since that incident, he had what appeared to be a lazy eye. Again, I'm bored with this information. There's too much information. It gives me so much factual bits and pieces, but all together, and I still have to look at the image as well and relate to it. This will not be very easy to store in the short-term working memory, and then again, obviously will not be transferred to the long-term memory as well. What I can do with this text is just have very few words. I've shrunk the basic information, and I've given an image which is clearer and it's aligned. As you remember the alignment bit a few slides ago, we talked about the alignment. So the alignment makes it easier for me to relate to the image and the text together. Okay. Another modality that we have learned from CLT is that we learn more effectively from animation and narration than from animation and text. Okay, so an example would be that you've got words here to describe what's happening. When you pull down on the rope, for every inch you pull down, the weight will pull up half an inch. There's one rope being pulled, but there are two lengths of the rope connecting the pulleys. Again, I doubt if all of you would be able to explain this to me immediately. But if I pair that with an audio again, sorry, can I again please request somebody to mute or unmute it? There's a bit of a background noise. Thank you. Okay, so animation and text and animation and narration, that's the comparison we're making right now. Okay. So this again is much more clearer. It's much more simpler. It's much more effectively retained in the short-term memory because I'm pairing the audio information, the audio stimulus, and the visual, rather than reading the text and then looking at the animation, because that basically involves your visual senses to be split up between two stimulus. When it's animation and narration, you've got the audio and the video. And again, that makes a stronger connection in the brain, that makes a stronger schema, and that's where you internalize this. So even if you don't completely pay attention to the narration, not 100% of the words are being internalized by you, even some of the words, you will still fill in the gaps with the animation, with the visual, and that will make a stronger connection. Yes, those of you, I'm sorry if you're not able to hear the audio, but as promised, you'll have the slides after the lecture, so you should be able to run the PowerPoint on your own end, and because the audios are embedded there. So I'm sorry if you're having some problem in accessing the audio on your end, because again, most of the people have been able to confirm that they've heard the audio. Okay, another modality that we see from the CLT research is that animation and narration are more effective when the narration is conversational rather than formal. So a lot of time we think that, okay, it's an online classroom, but it still has to be very formal. That is absolutely not the case. An informal conversation is much more effective. So the example is, you've got an image of cyclists, and if a person wants to train for the Tour de France, one must practice a lot. One must train almost 365 days per year and in all weather conditions. If you anticipate being the bike rider that gets in front of all the others, then you must have a lot of stamina and strength. Okay. Same information can be presented with the image. If you really want to ride in the Tour de France, you need to begin training as soon as you can ride your first bike and never stop. It intensifies the content when you're informal. Yes, Dr. Amina, absolutely correct. If you have two different stimulus at the same time, your short-term working memory will be better able to retain them. No, that's what CLT has uncovered for us. So CLT basically has established through multiple experiments and research that pairing up of the visual and auditory senses makes it easier for you to retain information. But again, it has to be, that doesn't mean that you have pages and pages of visual information and you have hours-long audio. It has to be, again, adapted to your content. It has to be customized, has to be made. Again, we'll go back to the necessary priority information, and then the additional should be presented separately. Okay, so we've gone over the formal and the informal, and the next is redundancy. Students learn more effectively from animation and narration, from animation, narration, and text. Again, that's pairing all three. So we've talked about the audio and the animation. We've talked about the animation and the text. And now if you pair all three, that becomes an overload as well. So I've got animation and narration. But if I have that and I have the audio playing as well, now this becomes an overload. Okay, so again, I quickly skipped to the audio because again, I know that you've heard it 2 times. The third time would become a further drag. So that's also how your senses are exhausted. So the same narration over and over again will be exhaustive as well. Okay, so this brings us to the basics of cognitive load theory. And in summary, so the cognitive load is real. This basically takes a toll on the short-term memory and the long-term memory. Sayeda Fatima is asking, more senses mean more information retained. Not that simplistic, Fatima. It's about how you pair the information. So maybe if I'm delivering a lecture on, as I said earlier on, maybe if I'm talking about economics, if I, again, show you the production possibility curve, I mentioned that earlier on. If I show you an image, a graph of the production possibility curve, or if I'm talking about accounting, if I show you accounting ratios, the calculations, and then I have a narration with it, it will definitely be more effective in your learning rather than just the one of them. You will have more focus, yes, if it's just audio or if it's just visual. But as long as it's paired together, you will be able to understand the concept much more clearly, and both your senses will be absorbing, internalizing, connecting the dots, making a pattern, and keeping that connection and retaining it faster in your long-term memory. So yes, Alia, that's correct. Shorter sentences, clearer information, absolutely correct. Okay, so just to sum up everything, professors are being asked to create online courses without knowledge of how students learn. So this is our first priority for all our learners today, for all the instructors today. As I said, you have a dual role. Your learners for this hour and a half, and then you go back to being the instructors. So we need online tutors to be able to understand the learning mechanism for a human mind, and then apply those principles and apply those to make your classroom teaching in a virtual environment very effective. So knowing CLT, understanding the concepts of CLT is going to be very helpful. I would like you all to go to the readings as well later on in the week. And I really look forward to the discussion forum input from all of you, where it actually refers to the reading that I've mandated for you, the required reading article about CLT, and it's the research that teachers should know. That's the actual title of the article, research that teachers should be aware of. Okay, so I'm hopeful that this has been helpful and you will be able to apply the CLT findings in your own content design and delivery within the classroom. And how do we use multimedia and how do we use the different information? Okay. The next part of the lecture will be delivered by my colleague, Mr. Ijaz, he will be taking care of the educational technology and design information for you. Sorry, I have quite a lot of questions really quickly if I can refer to. Thank you very much for those of you who've appreciated the content. I'm happy that you found it useful. Why we can't add all three: animation, narration, and text? I give you an example. I will, October, I look forward to your input in the discussion forum. You can have a look and you can get back to me whether you think that's effective. That'll be great. And every student has a different learning style. So for sure, yes, we need to know how they learn and we need to adapt within the lecture as well. What if we're taking interactive lectures on Zoom? Microsoft Teams along with PowerPoints with shared. Yes, so that's exactly what we're doing today. You've got the audio with me talking constantly, and then you've got the visual as well with the slides. So pairing that together is what makes it effective. If it was just the one, it wouldn't be as effective. Okay. How to account for diversity in the classroom when assessing underload or overload, right? Taskeen, you will find a lot of information about this in the articles. Again, I would refer you to the discussion forum. Let's have a chat there where you can talk about the overload and underload. And if possible, I will try and find you some more reading for that in terms of managing diversity. Okay. Right, over to you, Asway. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sumbul. All right, so Sumbul, can you see my screen? I think just to check.
If you're okay, sorry, have I stopped sharing?
I'm sharing now. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, now thank you very much. I think that was very informative. Thank you very much. So quickly, I'll just briefly introduce myself once again. My name is Ijaz Chaudhry. I have a background in online learning, and I've been running an online college with higher education institutes for the last 15 years. And I mentioned earlier that we partner with public sector universities in UK, and we offer their qualifications online. And back in 2008, we were the first private college to actually offer the MBA in an online environment. I also teach business and management, primarily international business strategy, and I teach at a university in just south of London called University of Creative Arts. Now, today's lecture is going to be about educational technology and the influence of technology on online learning environment and instructional design. So it is just going to be, we're going to be talking about that influence. And especially from the instructional design point of view, some aspects when we actually designed this presentation, we tried to cover in the learning outcome. We looked at the implication of instructional design from a media perspective, and some of the last few slides that you actually looked at were in that particular regard. Now, we are all aware that we are on the brink of a technological revolution that is going to change the way we work, the way we actually interact with each other, the way we essentially live. And this change is something which perhaps the humankind has never faced ever before. So it is going to change basically everything, how we work, how we live, and in essence, it's also going to have its implication in the education sector. Now, we were already on the cusp of this change. So this debate that the education is changing, the future of universities, has been going on for last many decades, and it has actually picked up some impetus in the last 10 years. But I think the only silver lining that we can actually find in the present pandemic is this, that it made us realize that we are on the cusp of the change, and we have to seriously look at the technology and how it is going to affect the education. And this actually goes with the other debates that's going to have the future of work, what skills the future worker require, 21st century skills, and so on and so forth. And interestingly, I think somebody, I mean, I just realized when Sumbal was teaching that somebody had actually left the mic open, and somebody actually asked a 9-year-old, I mean, I'm just saying that, to fix the camera. And I remember something 15 years back, my 70-year-old boss called me and asked me if I can remove Minefield. I mean, I think those who had early versions of Windows, they would remember there was a game called Minefield. And he asked me if I can remove the Minefield from his computer. And I did. And a few days later, he asked me that I asked you to remove it, but it isn't there. And I said, I did remove it, and I'm pretty certain I removed it. And he said that my 9-year-old grandson was actually playing it. So I looked at him and I said that I actually removed it for you and not for your 9-year-old. So this is another interesting discussion, which is the different generations that we are actually facing, the millennials and the Generation Z. And actually, I think I was looking at a job advert very recently where the title of the job was Generation Z Coordinator. I have no idea what it is, but definitely a few years back, this job never existed. So coming to today's topic and talking about the technological influence. So it's imperative to realize that the technology is going to be the game changer. It's going to have far deeper impact on our society and definitely onto the education as well. But when we talk about the technology influence, we have to look at it as a mediator rather than overloading ourselves with technology. It is very important that we look it as a facilitator rather than anything else. So I mean, and technology, because it's free, it's readily available, and at times we use too much of technology, and it actually is not really very effective. To give you an example, in one of the universities that we work with, and we realize that they use Microsoft Teams, they use Zoom, they use when they're using Teams, they're using the other utilities in the Teams, they're using Blackboard, they're using Collaborate, and the end result is that the student is confused. He or she doesn't know where he or she should be going to actually get the relevant information. So we must always remember that the technology is just a facilitator and nothing more than that. The essential principles of learning and teaching, which I'm pretty certain most of you know better than I do, stay the same. So what are the key influences that the technology has on learning? It provides greater control over when and where a learner can actually receive the learning. It provides greater and better access to knowledge and expert systems. We can use virtual reality, simulations to make trainings more real and work-like. Now, one of the most important factors with the use of technology is that we can the students can have a better control, and we can make the learning more student-centric. Now, the last 3 points is that with the use of technology, we can see that the administration can get very easy, and it can be done electronically. And this is where universities are actually struggling, that how they actually maintain their value chain, what activities they should carry on doing, and what activities they can actually outsource and give it to the people who are expert in this field. Similarly, trainings can be easily delivered to the students with the use of technology. So these are some of the methods, which are the technology-based methods that can be used for e-learning. I haven't included everyone. It's just some of the methods that can be used, and I've tried to be a bit more inclusive, but these are some of the methods: e-learning, social media, webcast, and basically two aspects that I've included here are blended learning and distance learning. They are very important in the today's environment because of the pandemic. We are actually teaching where the students are really not far away and they're not really dispersed, but yet we have to teach them online and we maintain that distance. But nevertheless, they're there, and it is important to understand that when the pandemic goes away, so we might actually like to reconsider how we actually use technology in our day-to-day use at the university and how we actually implement it. Now, one of the key attributes of technology is this, that it facilitates collaboration. I think we talked about, and communication, we talked about 21st century skills. So collaboration is what it actually facilitates. Now, two of the things that we have to consider when we talk about collaboration and communication is the synchronous and the asynchronous bit. And again, because it's important, because we have students who are going to be face-to-face, so we might have a combination of two methods that we might utilize to teach the students, and it could be completely distance learning. So it's important to understand that what is synchronous and what is asynchronous and what combination we should be actually using it. Like for instance, in today's lecture, or in the course that we are actually going through, we're using combination of both the methods. So right now we're going through a synchronous activity, but Sumbul explained that we have forums, we have reading material, which are asynchronous activities, and we have quizzes where you can go and interact with it. And there were some design considerations that actually went in when the course was actually designed. Now, the design considerations of the design models are not the ambit of today's lecture. So anybody who is interested in instructional design models, so they might be aware of ADDIE, ARC, and backward design, that some of the models that are being used in the online learning, and also the learning theories like constructivist theory or cognitivist theory are not part of the today's lecture. The technology also provides us far better and dynamic learning. I mean, these are some of the advantages that we're looking at, what technology can do for the online learning environment. So it provides better interaction between the learners and the contents, between the teachers, lecturers, and other learners. So teacher and lecturers become more of a resource, and the coaches. Now, I think most of you would be familiar with University of London external programs, and one of the programs which they offer in business and management through University of London Royal Holloway, and they have actually applied a different approach, which they call as the conductor-based approach. So the teacher, rather being in a conventional sense, broadcasting the information and knowledge, he works more as a conductor. And rather than putting the content in a linear sequence, the way we normally teach or normally design a course, they have actually designed a non-linear approach. I'm not sure on the long-term assessment that how well it has gone, but the initial assessment in the 1 year has been very, very rewarding. So the role of teacher with the use of technology is actually changing. It also allows us to access other experts and resources which we might not be able to access in a normal conventional sense. So more learning via social media. When I say social media, I mean learning from others, collaboration and things like that. Now, a lot of universities the modern universities like MIT, in particular, I would like to mention a university called Halliburton University. It's I won't call it a startup university, but it's a relatively new university. I think earlier part of this last decade, it actually came into being. So they don't have any fees, they do not do any classes, so they just do collaboration and they do by learning. So it's you do the things and you learn from the others. So these are the things these are the influences that technology has on the learning environment today. And Halliburton, I mean, if you have time, you must look at the model that how actually they are using technology to impart education. Now, I'm pretty certain that you're all familiar with these features of online learning. So we have text, and text may include anything from content. Content may include anything from text, videos, graphics, sounds, and to some very complicated simulation. So it also allows us collaboration and sharing. Collaboration, like for instance, it's important to understand that what tools can actually allow us to communicate and collaborate, and what tools would primarily be working as a content repository. Now, in the example that we're doing today, the lecture that we are doing, we're using a communication tool via Teams, but the content is placed on a Moodle. So we're using a combination of both of them to provide the content and also the means and tools to the students to communicate, collaborate, and interact with each other. So it's very important when you're actually designing to understand these features. And there's some very interesting features available in open resource and free of cost that can be used very easily for these features. So we can provide links to the resources beforehand where the students can actually get their resources, which it's slightly more difficult in a more conventional face-to-face. And we've talked about the learner control. So learner has far better and more control. They can decide what, when, how, and with whom they actually learn. So that flexibility is there in the online learning environment. Delivery is important in a sense that we need to see especially in the design implication, that whether when we are delivering a course or an element of a course, is it blended? Is there any face-to-face, synchronous, non-synchronous? So it's important that we understand that how it is actually being delivered. Administration, online administration from online enrollment, monitoring, and student progress completely changes. It's far better than you actually do in the face-to-face. So you have some great dashboards and all the learning management systems that are being used today that are available to the students. Now, these are some of the facts that are available that I've picked up from the web. Online is more effective than face-to-face for declarative knowledge. And online and classroom, the conventional learning are equally effective for procedural knowledge. Procedural knowledge is cognitive activities like reasoning and problem solving. So there's no difference as far as procedural knowledge is concerned between an online class and a conventional face-to-face class. The level of satisfaction for both the methods is generally the same. Now, especially online is better when we talk about the learner's control or the role of the student. And more universities are realizing that the students have to be the center of all the consideration when we talk about learning. When the course is of a longer duration, it has been found that the online learning is better than the classroom learning. So when we talk about methods, online and classroom learning are again equally effective. Now, students who generally devote more, I mean, this is very important, and I think this is something at times, in my experience, we have found out that if the student is not prepped properly and is not really devoted and doesn't put in the time that is required, so online learning can be really a big drag, and he can lag behind. That would be difficult to really catch up as compared to face-to-face learning. Now, again, in continuity with the second last point, Digital literacy is very important. Without adequate digital literacy at all levels, whether it is the administration, whether it is the teaching staff, whether it is the learners, it won't have that kind of an effectiveness. So one of the first steps that we have actually need to do when we think about use of technology in online learning, we need to do a self-assessment. And the first part of the self-assessment is we need to evaluate the organization in university, whether we have the requisite
Can I ask a
infrastructure.
question, sir?
Please.
Please explain the declarative and procedural knowledge you mentioned in the previous slide.
Okay, again, it was not really within, the purpose was not declarative and procedural knowledge. Declarative knowledge is fact, a statement, and procedural knowledge, as I explained, is a cognitive activity like critical thinking, reasoning, and things like that. And what we are trying to do here is... Please, yes, please.
Sir, we have been given a message that you are having just 4 to 5 minutes. The session will be ended, so it will be continued or it will be ended at 11:30.
I'll quickly finish it. I'll try and finish it in quickly, please. There's
Okay,
not much.
just
That
we are having 5
I might
minutes.
just go 5 minutes overboard.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So we need to provide we need to do an evaluation of the organization in the university, whether we have the infrastructure. We've talked about the digital literacy of the students. It's very important to know that the requisite amount of digital literacy is there for the students to undertake the qualification or the learning online. Now,
excuse me, here there was, this is Dr. Numana Amjad from Noor International University and previously from Punjab University. I teach cognitive psychology. So I would like to elaborate on a question here, declarative and procedural knowledge.
Please.
Declarative knowledge, as you said, is about theoretical information, formulas and facts, but the procedural knowledge is about how to do something. So in psychology, we say procedural memory is about doing things, how to ride a bike, how to conduct a physical examination, you know, how to actually score something and do it. So it is a body memory for procedural knowledge. And that's how memory stores it. You don't need formulas. You have to show people how to do something and then they practice. So that is the difference between procedural and declarative. So I kind of question whether procedural knowledge is actually better online. You have to obviously be very creative and show how to do things. In virtual university, we do practicals sometime of procedural significance. But you have to design it that way. You have to show them how to do a certain practical measure reaction time. Unless you show them, it's not procedural knowledge. So that's someone asked that. So I thought I would elaborate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I mean, like I said, yes. I mean, these are just the facts that for procedural knowledge, online and face-to-face are equally effective. I mean, that's the point that we have to take home today. And yes, rightly said, we need to design the course appropriately with appropriate resources and tools to show how the things actually work for the students to actually learn that. Anyways, I mean, once we have done the assessment, one of the things that we can actually do, I mean, because I mean we have been thrown at the deep end, especially after the COVID-19, to start teaching online straight from face to face, and without adequate analysis, without adequate thinking. So one of the things that we can actually do is prototyping. So it is just a scaled down version of the whole course, and we can then review it and define it. So a lot of people actually, before completely going online, try prototyping. So they would take some element of the course, some learning outcome, some assessment criteria, create a learning around it, review it, and then refine it, and then build the entire course. So refrain from repurposing. I mean, when online learning started a few decades back, now this is something that was actually being done very commonly. So what they would do is this, that they would simply simulate what was being taught into the class, and they would simulate it, try and simulate. I mean, if not really, the simulation was there in the perfect sense, but they would try and simulate the face-to-face learning to an online learning. Now, this is something simply we cannot throw what we have online. So we need to have far deeper considerations when we are actually moving from face-to-face to online. So repurposing is something that we should avoid. And quite recently, and it's not just in Pakistan, world over, with the COVID, we have seen that a lot of universities, a lot of tutors, what they have done is that they have simply repurposed the trainings or the lectures they were doing in the class online. So this is something that we need to avoid. One of the things that is very important in the use of e-learning and online learning is this, that we have to create an environment which is a learning environment. So, and some of the, I mean, I'm going to skip this slide because some of the aspects were covered as a design implication in CLT. Yeah, just because there is some disturbance, I'll see if I can mute.
Ijaz Sahab, this is Osama here from Nahi. I think we have participants that are starting to leave because they have classes after the lecture. So I'm hoping that now we can open the Q&A session for the remaining participants that are here, and we can put the rest of the slides on Moodle because it's 11:30 and some of them have some commitments after the lecture.
Sure, please. No, that's fine. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Ijaz Sahab and Miss Sumbul. So now we will open the Q&A session. So I would just request people to switch off their webcams, and we can take the questions one by one. The Q&A session will be short for 15 minutes only. So please try to keep your questions very precise, and the instructors would be more than happy to answer any of the questions. Also, please note that the recording of this lecture and slides and everything else will be shared on Moodle. So you,
Yes, Jamshed here from Bahar University.
Yes, Dr. Jamshed, please. Also raise your hands, and I will call your names.
Thank you very much for this nice session. Really, we got a lot. But one thing where I'm having a question, that was really that may be research-based things which were shared with us. But as we know as a teacher that when you expose more your learner to different stimuli, they can learn better. But in the slides, I got that, for example, if you mix 2 or 3 stimuli, then it overloads the memory. So can you please guide me, for example, then the previous, for example, through the exposure to different stimuli can distract the learner from learning? So.
Right, so I'm going to take this up. It's actually not as simplistic a statement that we can give. It cannot be a blanket statement, Teresa, because it varies, which is why I gave you a variety of examples. So there are times where pairing an image with text is effective. There are times where pairing the image with audio would be more effective. So it's about how you're applying it and what the context of the content is. So again, I will quote an example. If I'm talking about maybe accounting principles, it would definitely help me to have the audio narration there along with the image, so that I can define things and I can kind of show you. I showed you the mathematical image as well. Then again, just the text and the image is more than sufficient. If I overloaded that with an audio as well, that would take away from the image. So again, it has to be a judgmental call on the instructor's end of how to utilize that technology. And again, we talked about this earlier on a slide as well. You don't have to involve every different medium. It has to be an individualistic point.
Okay, thank you so much. We will close this question and we will.
You can say that is consideration because I have also wrote a paper on it on this online learning during the previous, because you have to manage the different pressures which the learner in our society, where technology is not so many, it has not penetrated in our society, or that is not available, easily available. So I think you should expose the learner with you, because you have to keep the all technological issues. Therefore, you have to keep the learner to expose to each and every stimuli from where they can get. That's my
Thank you
concern.
so much. Thank you so
Jamshed,
much.
I
So
mean,
now,
Dr. Jamshed is absolutely fine. I mean, what Sumbul said is you have to take frame by frame. So if you want to, at one time, you can, it's better to, and like I said, it's a judgment that how many senses you want to involve. And
Thank you.
of course, it could be a linear process leading on to the next sense and the next sense, and then you can actually do the things by actually doing it and practicing it.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you so much. I would request all the participants who want to ask a question that once it's answered, for the sake of giving everyone an equal amount of chance, we will entertain the follow-ups on emails or on the discussion forum on Moodle. So we have Dr. Zubia Masood. Dr. Zubia Masood, if you are still here, because I can see your hand raised, please ask your question. Okay, I think we have lost Dr. Zubia Masood. Dr. Amna Arif. Okay. Please make sure that you can unmute yourself before you are speaking. Dr. Farhan Sayed.
Thank you so much. I am Dr. Farhan from Comfort University, Vihari campus. Being a science professor, I would like to know something, how the practical research can be delivered online. What kind of experience do you have in UK? Because I have seen the online teaching process is going on from last many years in developing countries like UK and USA. But this is really very new. Might be in future it would be implemented in all over the world, as mentioned before. But how could be the practical knowledge delivered, because it is not an easy task? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Saab. I think won't have a straight answer for that. I think one of the instructional design theory is the backward design. I mean, I think if some of you are familiar with them, you would know of that instructional design model. Now, one of the things that, and you start from the learning outcomes and then you go backward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you examples. So we have universities here who have been teaching for years, research-based degrees and also skill-based qualification online, and especially at tech level as well. So again, it has to be designed. You need to do prototyping, you need to develop storyboards, which are two different things, and then perhaps design a course. And you can basically have a prototype and get a feedback on it. So, but definitely anything that is being taught face-to-face these days is being taught online as well. And we're talking about all kinds of skills that can be taught online. So there could still be some skills which cannot be, but definitely we know of a lot of skills that are being taught online. But of course, it's a far bigger exercise than we can perhaps cover today. And I think we can. It's a very good question, and I think we can take it to discussion forum and we can continue on it. Yeah, Osama.
Thank you so much, Ijaz bhai. Dr. Taskeen Mansoor.
Thank you, Osama. This is Taskeen Mansoor from National University of Medical Sciences. Just wanted the presenters to elaborate, like every other theory, are there any criticisms or drawbacks to the cognitive load theory?
Definitely, Dr. Taskeen. Like as you've answered your question, so every theory would have some criticism as well, and the same applies to CLT as well. But a lot of it is actually being implemented, and a lot of that has been connected with the learner abilities. The criticism is in terms of how tangible the loads are. So again, I will, if you're interested, I can add a few more reading articles that are relevant, that are maybe take a different perspective. So I could add them to Moodle, and if you are interested, you can have a look at those. As I said, once you look at the recommended readings, they will give you a little bit of a varied perspective from CLT as well about the use of technology. CLT, the concepts that we've covered today, and we also have some additional material that will support it. So I will add on some more readings that will give you a different perspective as well.
Thank you.
And I think it's also to keep it simple. I think one of the major disadvantages of CLT, especially in e-learning, is that it actually engages the cognitive processes, and it's something that is not observable. It's something that we cannot see it and touch it and feel it. Yeah. Osama, please.
Thank you so much. Dr. Rehan Ahmed.
This is Dr. Rehan from ITU, Information Technology University. I had a question regarding, in principle, so I have noticed that, for example, the attention span that a student may have during online lectures or during physical classrooms is different. So this is just one of the aspects that's different. So basically my question is that for CLT concepts, how do they differ when we are talking about physical classrooms or online studying? So how would we adapt them?
Okay, Jasper, can I field that to you? Adapting.
Ijaz bhai, are you still here? Sumbul, do you want to answer this?
I'm there. Sorry, I was actually talking and my mic was on mute. Now, attention span is definitely an issue. And it's more so an issue with the latest generation, and it has been, I think, gone worse because of the use of the mobile technology and mobile phones and smartphones. And we all are aware that how many times actually we look at our mobile phones or our smartware and things like that. Now, from a CLT point of view, I'm not really sure, but definitely, this thing is being propagated that we need to keep the learning in bite sizes, in small sizes. And this is something I was going to cover in the later slides, especially when we go on to the content, that the content has to be brief and within the guidelines of the attention span. So definitely something that we need to consider when designing an online course. And the activities have to be relevant and it has to be within those parameters. So we cannot have very, very long activities, especially with the Generation Z, where we have established literature and research that the students have a very limited attention span. I do not have the figures. At some stage, I did have the figures, but attention span is clearly an issue and is a serious implication when designing an online course.
Thank you so much. We will take only 3 more questions. So maybe we can type also the questions in the chat box, and the questions that get most number of likes may be asked. That could also be an opportunity. But in the meanwhile, Dr. Tuba Zaidi, you may ask, and the others may type their questions in the chat box, and we'll ask them in the order of the number of likes. Dr. Tuba, you may ask your question.
And also Q&A can go to the Moodle as well. So we can later on, at layer, answer those questions as an interact on Moodle as well.
Yes.
So I think, Osama, that would be a good idea if you can set up a Q&A as well, if they have relevant questions, so we can get back to them within the week.
Yes, we will do that. I think we lost Tuba, so we can just say Harim Bilal from BUIC. Miss Harim Bilal. Okay.
Thank you, Osama. This is actually Miss Harim Hilal from BUIC. I'm a lecturer of law. First of all, I would like to thank both Mr. Ijaz and Ms. Sumbul for very useful presentations. My question is specifically for Mr. Ijaz. And I think sir, it came up in one of your slides that it's better to have use of different online platforms, as in this particular course where we are using Teams for meeting and Moodle for resource materials. But wouldn't it be better to keep it all in one forum? Wouldn't it be much easier to access and keep track of? I think it would have helped us in this course as well, keeping in view the different level of tech familiarity of participants. Thank you, sir.
I absolutely agree with you. I think it's factual. I think you're right. But the only issue is this: that what would you do if the technology has certain limitation? So if a platform is not really built for communication and collaboration, so and we have other resource constraints like funding, for instance. If we can't really, some of the technologies that are available and provide everything as a single sign-on are quite expensive. So all of these things have to be considered. So for instance, we're doing a startup in Pakistan called Future Learn School, and we have the mission to be the first online school in Pakistan. But again, this was the consideration. But we are working on a platform where we can actually combine everything. So students want to communicate, students want to access information, students want to collaborate, and there are other activities that we want to do. So we're trying to basically build a platform with whatever resources we have, trying to use open source materials as much as possible to have a solution. But yes, you're right, it's better to have it, but at times you cannot have everything in a single platform.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So it appears there were a lot of questions, but none of them were liked by anyone else. So we will close the Q&A session now, and all other questions can be asked on Moodle. We will also add a Q&A discussion forum there. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating.
Osama?
Hello. Yeah.
Excuse me, Osama. I have no question, but kindly send us the login and password of Moodle.
Okay, we will address those issues after this call ends. Yeah, you can chat with me separately or email me. We'll fix that. So thank you so much, everyone. We will share the recording with you and the slides on Moodle. And best of luck. Now we have 6 days. In the upcoming 6 days, we will release instructions. So there needs to be an assessment, an MCQ assessment that needs to be completed. A module evaluation that needs to be completed. The readings on Moodle they need to be read, and then questions need to be answered on the discussion forum for an online community of practice. So these are the tasks for the upcoming 6 days. You can complete them at your own pace. But remember that especially in the assessment, if you score less than 60%, then you will not be able to complete the course. So please make sure that that you read all the required material. And thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, everyone.